6th pin is nothing, 7th is nothing, 8th pin is 6.5 volts again. Alright, here we are again. I have a machine here that I have worked on before, and this is one where, again, you can't find parts for it. The power supply went bad, and I was able to repair the power supply by replacing a few components in there and resoldering some pieces that had melted. It's been about 9 months since the machine's been in the shop, and now it's back in the shop with another power supply issue, so we're going to see if we can resurrect it again. It may be on its last legs. I can try, I'll probably try eBay again, see if I can find a power supply for this machine, but they are difficult to come by, and we pretty much have to repair any issues with it. So let's take it apart. Actually, first we're going to see what is going on with it. Alright, something is working in the power supply because we have a light, so that's good. I got nothing there. Okay. I don't hear the needle moving. Okay. Okay, the power switch doesn't do anything, so maybe that's the one I couldn't fix, but okay. So, not everything is working. Let's take it apart and see what we can find. Okay, here's our power supply. First thing I want to do, we've got 2 fuses. So we have partial power, so maybe one fuse is good, one's bad. I don't know, let's find out. I'm getting the old Fluke multimeter. I call mine a Fluke because it's made by Fluke. You can get these, you don't have to buy a Fluke. Fluke's pretty high-end multimeter. It's good for industrial use. For home use, you can get any multimeter because they all do the same basic functions. And so what we're going to do is continuity, so we can check these fuses. Okay. So if it beeps, fuse is good. Okay, that fuse is good. That fuse is good. Now we're going to check our diodes, because this is also the diode check mode. That's good. That's good. Now you can see where we did some work, so there's a little bit of crustiness in here, which is where it got hot before, and it may have gotten hot again. But we had replaced the capacitor in here because the capacitor blew up. But it doesn't look like my new solders got hot, my new solder connections. Okay, let's check. We're going to resistance, so we're checking across here, which is going to be the primary side of this transformer. Should be a low resistance, but not 0. So 6.5 ohms, that's good. And then our secondary of the transformer is going to be here. 1.1 ohms. And 1 ohm. So it looks like the transformer is good. That's good because that's a very expensive part to try and get. Let's see what we have across this. Okay, this switch turns off your main power, which is supposed to have, yeah, that's what the main switch touches. So this is always on, which is okay. It's kind of rigged so that it'll always be on, because the mechanics of that switch don't work. So this switch is working the way it should. There's another switch which looks like okay, this is a switch that your bobbin winder will hit, so that will change where the power is going. Oh, the dogs are barking. That's nice. That will change how your power is going for winding a bobbin. So that works. So when you insert a bobbin, it's going to change where this power goes. So far, the power supply portion is looking okay. So I checked resistance of this capacitor. Old capacitors are always suspect. It's got a very high resistance, which is good. I did not check capacitance, which I could do. Let's do that. Okay, this is another fancy meter. It's reading 1,000, so close enough. So it should be 1,000. It's reading 1,063. That's plenty close enough. The next part of this is really to check and see if I'm getting voltage out of here, which is where we come to the dangerous part. I've plugged in the power supply, so this is live, and we are going to do some live checks. First, I'm going to start on DC voltage, and then we'll go to AC voltage. And let's see, I'm pretty sure that my ground is going to be the 2, 3, 4th and 5th pins. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to try 1 and 4. Okay, I've got a voltage there. 6 volts. It seems a little low. Let's try AC. Okay. So DC. Six volts. Okay. We got 18 volts on the 3rd pin in. So the first 2 pins are your positive, and they're both the same. 6.5-ish. And then you have the 3rd pin, which is 18. 4th and 5th pins are your ground. 6th pin is nothing. 7th is nothing. 8th pin is 6.5 volts again. 9th pin I just sparked. Hopefully it still works. Okay, 6.5 volts. Alright, so 7th and 8th pins, let me figure out what they are. They could be AC, let's check that. It also could be that that's the foot pedal. I have to take this apart to figure out if that's what it is. 6 volts. Why does that seem low? So, alright, this capacitor read good on the meter, and it reads good on, it read good on the capacitor meter, and it reads pretty good, megohms, there. I replaced it with one that's similar, so this is not a long-term fix, this is a short-term fix. But now if we look at our voltage, so pins 1 and 2 are bridged together, pins 4 and 5. Now we're getting almost 27 volts. That makes a lot more sense to me on voltage. So our problem may have been the power supply, and it may have been the one component that I should have replaced but didn't. So since this went bad, I have these two as well. So these two are going to get replaced as well, because they're all the same age. And let's see if we can figure out when this was built. 8212. So that chip was made in December of 1982. And there's another capacitor. So capacitors do not last that long, typically. Well, so we're going to suspect all these capacitors. We're going to get replacements and bring this thing back to life. All right, here we are. It's been about half a second for you and a few days for me, and they're here. So I want to give a shout out to Mouser.com. They don't sponsor me or anything. I pay them lots of money. But Mouser.com, they are the Amazon of electronic components. I ordered these, and within 2 days they were on my doorstep. So whenever I order parts for a job, and I don't remember if I already told you this, but I'm going to say it again. Whenever I order parts for a job, I order more than what I need. So this is more than what is needed to do the job on this Husqvarna. But what it allows me to do is have more for the next time. And you know, some of these capacitors are the same between different machines, so these may get used again. In fact, one of the capacitors I already had because it goes into a different Husqvarna machine. So just building up my stock slowly over time, and I don't just do that for electronic components, I do it for other sewing machine parts as well. Which means it costs me more money because I don't charge that extra to my customer, but I just charge them for the ones that they're getting. So let's set up the soldering station and get to work. If you look on these, you'll notice that there's a little arrow with a negative. So that arrow is pointing to this side, to the right, and it's telling you that this right here is your negative. So that means this one's a positive. And then when I bend these leads over, I bend them over so that you can read, you can see the arrow and you can read the ratings, and that way you don't have to remove it again to read what ratings were on it. Because if you bent it this way, these codes on the back they don't mean anything to us, so you wouldn't know without having to pull the capacitor out of the board. So I try to make it so you can read it. In another 40 years, when this thing's still operating and someone wants to replace the capacitors, they'll say, oh, I can read it without pulling it off. That was such a nice person. Maybe I'll do it in 40 years. How old will I be? 84 going on 85 in 40 years, so. Is it the power supply? Okay, there's got my picture next to my board. Should I zoom you in? Let's see if I can do this. we're not centered, but well. Now, as long as I don't solder on my phone, I'll be okay. So you would think that this would be a time where I'm using the experience that I gained in the military, being on nuclear submarines for 26 years, to do this repair. And unfortunately, if you thought that, you would be wrong. I did very little soldering. In my schooling, when I first went through schooling in the Navy to learn how to do my job, the soldering lab, they gave us some components and some solder and some tools and said, here, have fun. So we had fun during the lab. That was my official learning how to solder in the Navy. Things have gotten better since then, but I was not at a rate that did most of the soldering, at least not on the stuff that I worked on. So we had, alright, so I put a little, it looks like an X, but it's a plus sign, that's positive, and a negative. So this hole and this hole is for this one. So whenever we had the soldering, we had another rate, someone else who would do soldering, because they went to a special school where they learned NASA level soldering for all the control systems for the nuclear reactor. So they were big time well-trained technicians for soldering. So whenever we found something that was broken that needed to be soldered, we would say, hey, it's a good time for one of your guys, one of your people to get some practice, and can you come solder this for us? And they would absolutely get a lot of really good practice out of it, because we don't have components that break very often that need soldering. And so for them to get some good practice on some typically non-nuclear grade material that I was working on, it was good practice for them. Alright, now what I always do, so I push these in to where they're going. What I always do is I double check. So I've got a positive and a negative. When I look at the arrows right here, they should be pointing down to where that negative mark is on my board. These are pointing up to where my negative mark is on the board, right there. And then these are pointing to the right, where I've got a negative mark on the board right there. Again, there's a positive over here. So all three of these new capacitors are on the board in their correct spot, and I want them to stay where they're at. So I'm going to do just bend over the leads a little bit to hold them in place. And now they're held in place, and then now set it down and we can solder. And this will not take very long. The hardest part's going to be putting this all back together. Okay, I spoke a little too soon because we have a problem. Okay, it's a minor problem. We've lost half of the pad on this one, which means that the place where this one connects, I don't think you're going to be able to see this. But it's only soldered on half of it, so what I'm going to do is take a look at the top. The top doesn't help me at all. I may solder a bridge to the next connection over. Alright, I just soldered a bridge over. I don't think I need to fluke that. I think we'll be alright. What I mean by a bridge is I just connected it to the connection next to it that it's supposed to be connected to, if that makes sense. So the little solder pad came off of the board, and so we just made sure that the connection was going where it's supposed to. And that happens sometimes on these old boards. Somehow when I was taking this apart, maybe I didn't get the solder hot enough to melt it all the way when I pushed it out. But regardless of what happened, it happened, it's over, and I think we're good to put this together. Check it out. But first, I'm gonna do a little isopropyl alcohol bath. Some people wonder, why do we go through the trouble on a machine like this? This thing is barely held on by a shoestring. This is the second time I've had to repair it. Different issues, and all due to age. Why? The machine's falling apart. I mean, look at the thing. When you look at the accessories tray, the door's falling off. It's just wide open with broken plastic everywhere. Well, many people who use these machines know, if this was Mom's machine and she left it to you, nobody's taking this machine away from you. You're never going to throw this thing away. And if you have fond memories of a family member while you're using your machine, then you're going to do whatever it takes to keep that thing running. And unfortunately these days a lot of shops will say, just throw it in the trash, and here we have this shiny new machine you should buy. And I mean, that's the way things are going. Everything's disposable. But I prefer to fix things rather than just get a new one. And if you have used this machine, the same machine, for many, many years, you know how to use it, and you don't want to learn how to use some newfangled thing, then we'll fix it right up for you. As long as we can. I do not have a 100% success rate. I don't think anybody does. Now this should come to life as soon as I plug it in, because this button doesn't work anymore. Okay. It's not really doing a calibration.